Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, please turn your attention to the box to your left for a very special guest. When you hear his voice, you know you're at an epic event because he's been the voice of 16 Super Bowls, the Olympics, the NFL Draft, and will once again be at the mic for Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, featuring your Philadelphia Eagles. It's public address announcer Alan Roach. Alan, thank you so much for stopping by.
Hey, thank you very much, Joe. It's good to be on the Bird's Nest Broadcasting Radio Network, podcast network. And I don't think I've ever had anyone say, ladies and gentlemen, and then announced me. So that was kind of cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, we had to have a little bit of fun with that going into that. Give you a little bit of your own experience, so to speak. And you've done this for a lot of people. You've introduced so many people over the years. As I mentioned, so many Super Bowls. You've done the Olympics. You've done so many other major tentpole events for Major League Baseball. You're the PA guy for the Minnesota Vikings, the Colorado Avalanche. How do you keep these kinds of big events from getting to you, so to speak, and making it feel like you're kind of in a routine?
First of all, you used a word in there I've never heard before. Tent pole events. What does that mean?
Well, like the signature events. So like the Super Bowl is a tent pole event.
But they all, yeah, I see. But most of them are put up tents, like at Field of Dreams for baseball or London. They have these big white tents. So sorry to get sidetracked, but I just thought that was a neat way to describe it. Um, how do I keep from I I don't know. I mean, I'm just so lucky in all of the things that I've been able to do. And I've now been this lucky and so lucky for 20 years, 15 at least, in doing all of these things. Um, I'm confident in what I do. I work with an amazing team. I have people that write my scripts. I have people that plug in my microphone. I have people that make sure I can see the screen. I have people that bring me a sandwich. Um, it's a lot more than just me. I have a great team, and we're really good at what we do.
Absolutely. You really get that far. I mean, you have a great team, and the fact that you're really good at what you do definitely gets you to doing all of these signature events, all of these so household events like the Super Bowl, which you've been doing since 2007, pretty much every Super Bowl over the course of the last almost 20 years, specifically for that. You started, though, in radio, and that was something that you've done for a while. But how did you get into PA announcing?
I started in radio the summer before my junior year in high school. So the summer after my sophomore year in high school, so about maybe what, 16 years old, 17, whatever.
Mhm.
And I did radio all the way until 2015. I've lived in Denver since 2001, since 1991, sorry. So I did radio in Denver from '01 to 2015. Do the math, what is that, 26 years or whatever. And I had done radio for 12 years before that. So yeah, radio was certainly my base. How I got into PA announcing, I've told this story so many times. I was working in Colorado Springs, Colorado, 1990. The Colorado Springs Sky Sox were the minor league baseball team for the Cleveland Indians. They played at Sky Sox Stadium. I went to Sky Sox Stadium with a friend from the radio station. He knew the assistant GM of the Sky Sox. In the third inning, we found ourselves in the little tiny press box at Sky Sox Stadium. There's, maybe eight people in there, and one of the eight was the PA announcer over in the corner announcing the names as they came to the plate. And they were pretty far advanced for being 1990. They also had a computer where they played sound effects, the typical minor league ball leaves the stadium and you hear a windshield crash or a frog, whatever. And so I watched him doing that while we were having this conversation, and I just said to the GM, hey, if you ever need somebody to fill in for him, that looks really fun. I'd like to do that. He said, have you ever done it before? No, but I'm sure I could do it. I'd like to try. He said, well, crazy enough, in 3 weeks, he's going to be gone for a Friday, Saturday, Sunday for a wedding or something. And if you want to do those games, you can. I did. I did those 3 games, and I feel bad every time I tell this story that I've never been able to find out that guy's name so I could call and apologize to him. But the GM came to me after that third game of the series and said, "You're really good at this. If you want the job, it's yours." And I finished out that season and I started the next season. Then I got hired in Denver in radio, and I immediately started applying for the Colorado Rockies position. And that was my first major league professional sporting team and event. I started with the Rockies in 1993, their first day.
And that's crazy. The fact that it was just that quick of a turnaround. I mean, talk about cutthroat in an industry a little bit, but
Well, and the crazy part of that is, had I not gone to the baseball game with that guy that day, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And I'm sure he said, "Hey, you want to go up in the press box and meet the GM?" I don't remember, but I'm guessing my response was, well, "Wouldn't you rather just sit here and have another beer?" And so, if any of those things wouldn't have happened, I would have never been there to do that, and I'd never be here to do this.
absolutely. Yeah. And that's, again, it's just crazy how all of that sort of snowballs there and a career like yours can take off. When you were doing radio, you actually, so you took on a radio name. So Alan Roach is your radio name. Your given name is Kelly Burnham. How did you arrive at Alan Roach as your radio name?
There's some stories I just don't tell. And actually, I mean, it's not that crazy. Um, Kelly, my first radio name was Kelly O'Shea, very Irish. Top of the morning to you. It's Kelly O'Shea on KKEZ. We're in the middle of another 45-minute nonstop power play. And so when I came to Denver, I was Kelly O'Shea. I was Kelly O'Shea in Colorado Springs, in fact. And so when I came to Denver in 1991, uh, I was doing afternoons on a classic rock station called the Fox in Denver. And the Fox played Led Zeppelin and Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd and Jimi Hendrix. And so I was going to be Kelly O'Shea, but there was a competing radio station that had an afternoon guy named Michael O'Shea, and another competing radio station that had a guy in the afternoon named Steve Kelly. So they didn't want me to be Kelly O'Shea. I'd get lost in the muck. Um, my older brother, when he went to college and played football at Southwest State University in Minnesota, some of his friends called him Roach, and it was kind of a play on the name Burnham. What do you do with the roach? You burn him. And I had just met, they're, hey, we need a new name for you. And I just mentioned, well, they called my brother Roach. And as soon as I said Roach, it was kind of like where the angels come out and sing and Ma, because to use the connotation of Roach with Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, it was perfect. And that's how it came about.
Crazy. I mean, it's cool. At least there's like definitely that family connection there with it, and you didn't have to shed all of that when you went with a completely different
Yeah, my
direction.
brother wants royalties all the time. I basically took the name that he had and he started.
Absolutely. So, again, you've done PA announcing for multiple sports. You grew up in Minnesota, big fan of the Minnesota Vikings yourself. You did PA announcing for the Colorado Rockies. You continue to do them for the Colorado Avalanche. You've hit many, many other sports. Is there a favorite sport for you to announce?
Um, yeah, and I'm not ashamed to say it either, and it doesn't take anything away from any of the other sports, but for a PA announcer, the most fun is football. With baseball, A, there's 81 games, and B, every game is exactly the same. You just say batter after batter after batter after batter, and that's what you do the whole day. Um, Hockey and soccer are pretty much the same, although hockey, you do more than soccer. But in hockey, sure, you do the starting lineups, which is exciting, and then you wait for a goal. And sometimes there's only one goal in a hockey game. You announce goals and penalties, and that's about it. And of course, all of the games come with, reading the commercials. Hey, be sure you pick up the official tire of the Colorado Avalanche or whatever it is.
Or
Um,
Lou Nolan over here
yeah,
for the
yeah,
Flyers doing that. It's time now for the Pico power play.
there you go. So football, you're commenting on every play. I call it skeleton play by play. It's play by play like the guys that make billions of dollars do, except I don't use any of the colorful descriptive words, just kind of real basic. Johnson, the ball carrier, a gain of 2, 2nd and 8.
Crazy. Yeah, no, that is interesting. Yeah, with the with hearing those differences laid out, definitely is fascinating. Do you how do you prepare to call a whatever game that you're going to or whatever event that you're going to be the PA announcer for? What does your prep look like?
Um, you'd like to say that you study, the rosters and you memorize the names and you do. There's no need for that, and I don't think my brain could handle memorizing all of the different names from the different sports and the different numbers. That would make me crazy. Um, for the most part, the preparation is getting the script, and sometimes my script comes 2 hours before the game. Sometimes it comes the night before, and just reading through the script and asking, hey, this line sounds kind of funny. Do you mind if I say it this way? Or is this what you meant to say? Or this word is misspelled. Make sure that it looks good so that when I get to it, I don't stumble over it. And then the other thing, and it's by far the most important, and it's any PA announcer, any buddy that wants to be a PA announcer that's listening, hear this. Learn how to pronounce every single name correct 100% of the time. And it's not always easy. There are PR directors and media, directors that are supposed to kind of help with that. Sometimes they're difficult to track down, sometimes they're difficult to find. In the NFL settings or the Major League Baseball settings, it's a little bit more controlled and you know where you're going to find them. Sometimes in the Olympics, it gets weird and you're dealing with, hockey teams from Latvia and the Czech Republic and names that have 9 syllables in them. Bottom line for me is if I ask the media guy, hey, how do I pronounce this name? He goes, I think it's blah, blah, blah. And I go, well, do you know it's that? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'll say, I'm not going to say his name unless you're sure how to say his name. That's basically what a PA announcer does. You are there to tell people who is on the field and what they're doing. And if you say their name wrong in front of their mom and their dad and their grandma and their wife and their brother and their son and their sister, you look like an idiot and you look inept. And I would agree. Now, have I made mistakes? Absolutely. Have I been given bad information? Absolutely. But there has never been a time that I've sat down at the microphone that I don't feel like I've done everything I can to know how to pronounce every name.
And that's really important advice. So I appreciate you sharing that because that's I've been hearing all season mispronunciations of like names like Dallas Goddard or Jordan Mailata or other names like that who you would think that like living in that environment, those names are so very familiar for you. Um,
And the press guide isn't always right or enough.
yeah.
Often because first of all, think about when they're making up the media guide, whether it's for the game or for the season, and they give the 21-year-old intern, hey, it's your job to go write a pronunciation guide. Well, they've never spelled anything phonetically before. They don't know how to do that. And oftentimes, when people that don't know how to spell things phonetically or write them out phonetically, oftentimes it makes it worse. It makes it more confusing. So the best way is to talk to someone and say, and I always say, how does he say his name or how does she say her name? And one thing that's technology's kind of helped now, and MLS does this almost with every team, and I wish other teams would do the same. I noticed some baseball teams do it on their websites, and it would, it takes 10 minutes. You just walk around with your phone and you have every person on the team say their name. And then you know whether it's Jordan Mailata or Jordan Mailata or Jordan Milata. How does Jordan say his name?
Awesome. Yeah, and that's definitely good advice for any aspiring, even like a PR person for a sports
Yeah.
team. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good advice for anybody out there who just really wants to having that name element really conveys a lot of respect for the person too. So,
Yep.
um, absolutely important. Are there any events that have stood out to you over the years? Obviously, Super Bowls have been huge for you. But are there any events that stood out for you?
I mean, they all do, Joe. Yeah, the first Super Bowl I did, the fifth Super Bowl I did, the eighth Super Bowl I did, the 17th Super Bowl that I'm going to do this week. Are you kidding me? I'm announcing the Super Bowl. That's the way I feel every day when I wake up on that Sunday morning. I wake up and I look around my hotel room and I go, wow, I'm going to announce the freaking Super Bowl today. Um, Makes me a little bit emotional because it's crazy. But then there's so many other events. The very first Rockies game ever was in Mile High Stadium, a football stadium, with 81,000 people at a Major League Baseball game. And the very first Rockies batter, Eric Young, hit a home run. And baseball hadn't been in this city professionally for many years. And so that was just amazing to have 81,000 people going crazy at the first ever baseball game that I did, which was the first ever major league sporting event I'd ever announced. Going to the Olympics, whether it was Salt Lake City or Sochi, Russia or Torino, amazing. The Field of Dreams, did games at the Field of Dreams in Iowa. Major League Baseball in London, NFL in London. Um, I'm not rolling down or name dropping on all the events I've done. I've said, how do you pick out something that's better than the other? Every one of them is a pinch me moment for me.
Two other questions for you here. So, the first one, we talked about all of the big events that you've done, but obviously, your two main focuses right now that really draw a lot of your time on your PA announcing, the Minnesota Vikings, who you've been a fan of since you grew up, and the Colorado Avalanche, where you live, and you've been doing their games for a long time. Have the signature events that happen, those tentpole events that have those kinds of fan draws from all over the sport versus the just doing the your regular home game with a team that you're a really big fan of. Is it easier or maybe a different challenge to do those kinds of games versus those signature events where it might be a little bit harder to get everybody worked up, or you might be catering to less to a specific audience?
Doing the Vikings is different than anyone else. Um, because the Vikings more so, and it's not other Minnesota teams, just the Vikings, they're inside here. Um, the Vikings have been the team that I cannot not watch and not care about and not listen to every piece of media there is about the team ever since I was literally 3 years old. Um, and so to go to work for the Vikings was different than anything I had ever done before. And like I know I said back when it started that announcing my first preseason Vikings game at US Bank Stadium, which was August of 2016, I had already announced, I don't know, 10 Super Bowls, whatever it is. Announcing that Minnesota Vikings game was far more exciting and nerve-wracking for me than anything else I'd ever done before. And again, it's because the Vikings were in here. It was just a different feeling. Um, but as far as all of the other events and you know whether I'm a fan or not, to some degree, it's almost easier not to be a fan. But at the same time, I'm a huge fan of the Colorado Avalanche. And when the Colorado Avalanche play the Minnesota Wild, I'm a fan of the Colorado Avalanche. There is no question about it. I want the Avalanche to do well. The more playoffs games the Avalanche go to, the more game checks I get. When the Avalanche win the Stanley Cup, I have 2 Stanley Cup rings. I want the Avalanche to win. I love the Colorado Avalanche. But there's still a difference between the Avalanche and the Vikings, and it's not because I make it that way. It's just that's the way it is. And when I was with the Broncos for 16 seasons, and I traveled with them as part of the radio crew, I was a sideline reporter, and so I knew many of the Broncos, probably more than I know most of the Vikings. And yeah, I wanted the Broncos to do well, but the difference is, anytime the Broncos played the Vikings, I couldn't let anybody know, but I certainly had a rooting interest in that game, and it wasn't for the Orange team. So yeah, the Vikings is a different animal, and it's talk about pinch me moments. When I found out that I was going to be the announcer of the Minnesota Vikings, I at that point felt this is the coolest thing I will ever do in my life.
All right. Well, Alan, that is really, really cool. And last question for you before we go. Are there any players that you're looking forward to calling their names at Caesars Superdome in New Orleans?
Well, no offense to you Eagles and Chiefs fans, but this is getting a little old, isn't it? I mean,
For you.
you Eagles ruined our Minnesota Vikings Super Bowl in Minnesota back in 2018. Of course, the Chiefs and Eagles played. Was that the Arizona Super Bowl 2 years ago?
Yep.
And now again. So yeah, I mean, I no, I'm gonna have a great time. It's gonna be an amazing day. It's probably gonna be an amazing game. Um, so I don't play any favorites, and honestly, I don't care who wins. I hope for a really good game for the fans' sake. It doesn't matter to me, I guess. If the game's a blowout, it's probably not as fun to announce as a game that's close. But I don't have any rooting interest, and I certainly can't lean one way or the other. Both teams, no matter which team is kind of going through a good patch or whatever team is going through a bad patch. I know that the fans in the stands are like, "Oh, the PA announcer, he's really pushing the Eagles on the man. The PA announcer, he's really one-sided for the Chiefs, isn't he?" I get that stuff all the time, and that's just part of the business. But no, I hope for a great, great Super Bowl. And if there's anything I hope for more than anything else in the world, it's that one day there'd be a lot of purple in a Super Bowl, and I'd get to announce that one.
All right. Well, Alan, again, I appreciate you taking the time as you prepare for the biggest day in the NFL season. Thank you so much for that. And for Eagles fans who are going to be down there, or Chiefs fans who are going to be down there, or really football fans who are going to be down there, they'll be looking forward to hearing your voice during the game. And we'll be looking forward to hearing your voice during the pregame and the postgame ceremonies that'll be picked up on the TV. So thank you so
Yep.
much for that, Alan.
You bet, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Fly, Eagles, fly.
Fly, Eagles, fly. And thank you to everyone for tuning in to the Bird's Nest podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, as well as by sharing to your social media pages. You can also find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, and iHeartRadio. Please visit birdsnestmedia.com for additional Eagles and NFL coverage. And if you feel so inclined to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go, Eagles.